and millage rate hearing. Let's start with our call to order, and we will also now move on to item 2, roll call.
All right, Madam Chair, I'll call the roll. Ms. Heidi Hensley, Ms. Claudia Butts,
Here.
Ms. Linda Davis,
Here.
Dr. Patricia Yeager,
Here.
Mr. Tim Denson,
Here.
Dr. Mumby Anderson,
Here.
Dr. Lakeisha Gant,
Here.
Ms. Nicole Hull,
Here.
and Mr. Mark Evans.
Here.
Wonderful, thank you. We have a quorum. We will now move to item 3, to adopt the agenda as presented. Would someone like to make a motion?
So moved. Second.
All right, motion made by Dr. Yeager and seconded by Ms. Davis, and approved. Oh, sorry, let's call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
And that motion passes. Thank you. We will move on to item 4, the FY 2025 budget presentation. Mr. Greiner, would you like to come up and talk about our budget?
All right, good evening. Thank you, Dr. Anderson. So just wanted to kind of give an update on the FY25 budget. Drop my pen there. So from our last meeting on May 9th, we've had just a few slight changes. We did add in the items that were recommended at the last board meeting on May 9th, which was increasing the classified increase from $12.50 to $17.50, adding the 2 parapros at each elementary school, and also adding 2 mental health counselors at each high school. So those numbers are reflected in this presentation. So if I got is that the PDF? Or is that the, okay. Got it, okay. Okay, so that's basically our agenda tonight, is just to kind of do an update from that May 9th meeting. So, strategic plan, I will not go through that. I'll skip over some of these slides if there weren't any changes on them. So we did get good news from the state on 2 counts. Normally when we get our amount, our QBE amount from the state, it's normally a pretty firm number that doesn't change. This year with the increase in transportation funding, I was kind of surprised because we didn't get as much as we thought we were going to get. So we did get our final numbers. So it actually, there is an increase in the presentation tonight over what y'all saw on May 9th of $1,159,005. So that's a positive. We'll see that reflected shortly. Also on the safety grant increase, it was actually, we had budgeted $45,000 because that was the original advice we had got from the governor's office. It actually ended up being a little over $47,000 per school. So that's about a $2,000 increase. So that's the $44,000 you see in that slide. Excuse me. So looking at the state budget changes, there are no changes on this slide from last time other than the school security grant we just mentioned went from $45,000 to a little over $47,000. So then we'll get into the revenues. No changes on the tax numbers. Again, growth of 9.63%. We factored in 1% delinquency. Our tax commissioner does a wonderful job collecting. Normally it is around 99%. We do pay 2.5% for that collection fee, which is pretty much standard across the state of Georgia. There might be a few municipalities where the city might collect taxes that are maybe a little bit less. That has been my experience, but 2.5% is kind of the standard collection rate across the state. We do factor in a little bit for delinquent payments, and we left the millage rate per the advice at the May 9th meeting where it currently stands at 18.8 mils. So looking, that delay? Maybe, could be me. All right, so there's our millage rate. Of course, in 22 we were at 20 mils. And then the decision was made in FY23 to drop that down to 18.8, and we're of course recommending it stay at 18.8 for FY25. So for QBE, the only change here was the increase in the transportation, pupil transportation I mentioned. So the bottom number changed to 86.8 million. That's our anticipated amount for QBE for next year. So this just kind of recaps that. We do have $500,000 in there for the midterm adjustment. I mentioned that at the last budget presentation, that typically our FTE is, of course, calculated in October, November. That gets adjusted. So we're always a year behind or in arrears until the governor approves the budget. It comes in January and does like a midterm adjustment. So we actually had an increase in certain categories in our FTE, also a slight increase in our FTE. I feel like we're going to be in the same position next year. This year it was close to $2 million. I just put $500,000 in there to be conservative. So we'll. It's one of those things. I put it in there before and I haven't. So this year I feel pretty comfortable putting in at least 500. Estimated revenues, you'll see we're a little over 235 million, so an increase of about 21 million over last year. So looking at expenditures, again, these are the state mandated changes. No changes from our last discussion. On the initiatives, we did bump, as I mentioned, the salary increase to $17.50 for all classified employees. We added down at the very bottom the 28 paraprofessional positions. I will go back and add for tomorrow night's presentation. It doesn't have the 2 mental health counselors on there, but they are included in the budget. I noticed that late this afternoon, so I'll get those added on this slide. No changes in our ARPA positions from previous discussions. So if you look at our expenditure comparison, we're a little about 240.6 million for FY25. I did add the increase over last year, just as kind of a point of reference. So that's about a little over 12.38% increase over last year. So I thought a good way to look at that is to actually break that down into what's state mandated that we have no control over. So state mandated, you can see, is a little over 12 million. I included the classified salary increase, even though the governor doesn't set that and we don't get any state funding for that. Because typically if we get a certified increase, we're going to increase the salary for our classified employees. To me, it's not mandated, but it's kind of mandated. So you can see the increase there is 5.64% of the going back one, the 12.38. And then if you look at just our initiatives, our changes, that's about 6.74% of that increase. So you look at the overall increase, it looks big at 12.38, but then keep it in mind, about 6% of that is changes that we have no control over at the state level, that we are, again, the mandates that come from the governor's office. So, and if you look at our changes, most of this is on salary and benefit side. You look at new positions to the general fund through ARPA, which is detailed. You look at new positions, which this includes the paraprofessional positions. The operating expenditure increase to 5.3 million this is the salary benefit difference. If you look at the operating expenditure difference, this is the $5.3 million. $2 million of that is deferred maintenance that we're going to propose transferring over into a capital projects account that we can use throughout the year for local projects that would be brought before y'all, of course, if they exceed our board policy amounts. You also see the fire alarm replacement, building automation control, intercom systems. Some of these are just capital expenditures that are included in that 5.3 million. So our overall operating expenditures really are not increasing a large amount. Some of these were also previously covered by ARPA, the majority of them. So this is just programs that we feel we need to continue, so it was worth including in the FY25 budget. So getting to our budget summary, when we concluded the May 9th meeting, we were looking at using about 6.7 million of our fund balance. Because of the pupil transportation and the safety grant changes, we're looking at using about 5.5 million of our fund balance now, which would leave us a little, almost 49.5 million, so would be 20.55%. Again, we mentioned at the last board meeting, we really Dr. Hooker and I would love to stay around 20%. I had somebody point this out to me on a CFO roundtable recently, and I hadn't really, thought about the 15% rule was set many years ago. However, classified health insurance, TRS, are way higher than what they used to be. When I started out doing this back in 2011, 12, I think we were having to subsidize like $125 for classified health insurance. Now it's almost $1,700, $1,800. So I think the 15% rule used to be in the past, but I think more districts are kind of hovering around that 20% now. Seems to be the more conservative approach to that. And it was mentioned about our fund balances, so I thought I would include this slide. We have three main categories. We have the general fund, which is what we just looked at, about 49.5 million. We have special revenue funds, estimated balance at the end of this, or at the end of FY25, probably around 10.6 million. Again, that's based on, we don't know where some of our federal programs will end up. Most of that consists of our school nutrition program, after-school programs, our principal accounts at the school level. Keeping in mind we have 21 schools, so you have balances there as well. And then capital projects funds, estimated balance of about 34 million. Again, that use is totally restricted to approved either local funded projects or to our East Bloss projects. So again, you know, the special revenue capital projects funds have restrictions on them. So the money that the board, you know, at the general fund level to run the day-to-day operations of the school board is the 49.5 million. And I think that is timeline. You know, this is our first budget hearing. We're required to have 2 budget hearings. We're required to have 3 millage rate hearings. I think that the concept was, since we're already doing the millage rate hearing, we would do an additional budget hearing. So that's why we're doing 3 budget hearings. So we have the first tonight, we have one tomorrow night at 6, and then we have one next Wednesday, and then we have the final approval on next Thursday night at the board meeting. We have issued all the ads in compliance. I've confirmed that with tax commissioner. So far, we are completely in compliance with everything we've done. So as long as we stick to this schedule, we will definitely be in compliance. So, and I'll be happy to answer any questions y'all might have on the budget.
Thank you so much, Mr. Griner. That was a really wonderful presentation. I loved the additional tables of breakdowns of the differences in last year versus this year. I think it's really helpful in understanding the difference in our budget. I will open up the floor for any questions that anyone might have. Ms. Davis?
So every year I ask this question only because I want to make sure the answer doesn't change. We are not asking for a tax increase, but our ad always displays as such, and it is worded that way. Will you explain to us again why it is written as a tax increase requested by the Clark County School District?
Yes, ma'am, I'll be glad to. We're not increasing the millage rate. It is staying the same at 18.8 mils. By law, it is considered a tax increase because we are not rolling back to where the same amount of taxes we would have collected in FY24, we would have to roll the millage rate back to about 17, a little over 17.5 mils. So basically, it's the reassessed values on the property, which is about 7.36% for FY25, which is 2024's tax digest. That's where the increase comes in. It's just the reassessed values. So if the millage rate was rolled back, which would be an additional loss of revenue of about $9 million, that would not constitute a tax increase. Anything above that 17.5 mils constitutes a tax increase.
Is there a better way to say it?
Unfortunately not. And some people will have an increase and some will not. That's the other part I always like to add, because it really just depends on the assessed value of your house. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone? Oh. Anyone else? Yes, Dr. Gant, I think I saw your hand first.
Yes, I just had a couple of follow-up questions. From my understanding, you mentioned that the change with the fund balance, it's about 20.5?
Yes, ma'am. That's here. I'll get back to that. Yeah, 20.55%.
Okay. And so I was wondering, I think when we first had the meeting on the priorities that we had with the board, where each board member shared out, things that were priority for them. I definitely know that the classified staff increase was one of those, and so very appreciative of that. But I'm wondering, is there room to increase that 1750? Well, there are a few things I'm wondering, and how it might fit with that 0.55, right, if we are aiming for 20%. One is, what room do we have to increase the classified staff pay? Is there any more room there? Because the certified staff is going to be at 2,500, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So is there room in that increase to be able to add a little more to our classified staff, or even, I think at that time I mentioned like with our librarians, and I think I placed a question somewhere about just how much, we're funding our librarians. And then at that time also mentioned a stipend for teachers or either for schools for materials. I've seen a few times where teachers have had to teachers have had to do like either online GoFund, like not a GoFundMe, but some type of raising funds to be able to get like smaller things. And so I'm just wondering if there may be room for any of those areas. That was my first question.
I think we can go question by question. I believe your mic is off, Mr. Griner.
Thank y'all. All right. So I think the question about the classified, our main concern there on it potentially increasing it above the 1750, and I'll definitely let Dr. Hooker weigh in as well, was the sustainability of that going forward. I think with the tax digest, there's some uncertainty with some of the legislation that was passed this past session with the governor's office that we don't really have a whole lot of clarity on. There's a potential cap on the amount of increase that might come along. I think that's some of our concern. With adding additional positions also, there's a sustainability of those, which I think those are very much needed as well. But I think that was our main concern of going much higher on that. But I'll let Dr. Hooker, because I know we had several conversations about that as well.
You're correct. I've had several conversations with superintendents across Northeast Georgia area as well as other counties, and that's our major concern, especially with the cap, with the property taxes that is proposed. I think it's 3% or something, and then if it's passed, then we would have to get a vote of the people in the community in order for us to raise that. So that's a huge concern for us. You also mentioned about a supplement for our media specialists or librarian. They're considered certified employees, so they will receive the $100 as well. It will not be separate. I'm correct in saying that.
That is correct.
The other one, teacher supplement for supplies. Each principal, in their allotment, they are given money to give to teachers that they could buy supplies with. In the past, maybe 2 years ago, I think the governor and others used to give us not a debit card, a gift card, and then 2 years ago, I think it was a wallet pay that they did. 2 years ago, I believe it was on like $100 or something of that nature. I'm not sure if they're going to do that this year, but I do know that principals are, in their budget, is given to give teachers supplies. There may be some additional stuff that teachers won't. I know that they've either asked parents to do it, or some of them have purchased it on their own to do that. But yes, I'm very want to be very conservative in this budget when we come to that, because can we sustain that after next year? Because our revenue has decreased from the past 2 years, and if it continues to decrease, how long would that sustainability happen?
And I will say that, to echo what Dr. Hooker said, being in other districts, we try to do what we receive from the state for operational supplies, which includes the supply money that we give to each school. We try to do a 1-to-1 ratio on that. I have been in other districts where they did not do a 1-to-1. Like, they kept some of that money back and say they did 75%, 50% even. So we have always tried to, here as a district, even going back to when I was here 3 years ago, to kind of fully fund what we receive from the state to our school level. There was some discussion, and I'm still trying to get some clarity on this, Dr. Gant, because it kind of disappeared. At the state level this year, they were talking about creating a store where the state would supply money for teachers to use, similar to what they did a couple years ago with Class Wallet. It kind of went away, and nobody's talked about it. GSBA, GSSA, Georgia School Superintendent Association. So I did a little research, Googled it, after our last meeting. I just can't tell if that's something that's going to come to fruition or not, because we were thinking, and I think that goes back to what Dr. Hooker said, we're kind of hoping the state would do that as well. So I will definitely try to do a little bit more research on that and ask some other districts what they've heard on that, because at the very beginning of the session, it was a very hot topic. They were going to create this store, like a catalog almost, and they were going to give teachers money, and then they could go to that store and actually purchase. Probably they never set a dollar. That was the other thing. They never set a dollar amount. I was thinking 250 or 500, something like that. So, but I will try to get some more information before we finalize the budget on that as well.
Okay. Dr. Yeager, I believe you had a question.
I was just going to ask, I think Dr. Hooker answered my question of this practice that the community, some members of the community seem to want us to roll back the millage every year to match the budget. And so you said the millage rate would be 17.5 if we
Yeah, I think it's
rolled it.
actually, 17.511. It's
Okay.
a calculation that's done each year. Once the
Right.
tax assessor finishes their work, they basically do a calculation that determines what that millage rate would be.
And then you said, I think that's $9 million difference in what we would collect.
It is.
So can we say, what is that $9 million buying the school that is so critical? I mean, I kind of know what the answer is, but can we formulate an answer to the community to say, this is being rolled into more parapros or more positions that were funded by ARA or whatever,
Right.
ARPA, whatever it is. I mean, I guess if we could sort of frame the narrative a little bit about what that $9 million is being spent on and why we're not doing what they want us to do.
Right, and I think that's a great point. I think, roughly, I didn't do the calculation, normally it's between 85–90% of our budget is salary and benefits. So pretty much that $9 million, you're exactly right. It's funding the classified health insurance that's not covered by the state at all. It's covering our transportation department. Even though we got additional transportation funding, it's still, I hate to say woefully, but it is woefully underfunded for what it takes us to run it. Our transportation department takes between $10 and $11 million to run. We receive, this year will be the highest amount. I think we're close to $3 million, but we're still about $7 million short. So we can, there's a narrative to be framed there. So that's typically what the tax digest covers, is the items that aren't covered, of course, by the state.
And how many people in the schools actually interacting with our kids that
Right.
money would cover, and how many extra teachers and parapros and certified
Right.
staff that covers? That would be nice to kind of have that number.
Right, because actually, all the positions we're talking about adding, if you look at what we receive from the state in our allotment sheet, we're typically 60 to 70 positions certified over that amount. That doesn't even count classified.
Yeah,
So the tax digest is covering those 60, 70 positions, which you think, oh, it's only 60 or 70, but with benefits, an average teacher is anywhere from $85,000 to $95,000. So it covers a lot.
could we also frame it in terms of classroom size? Because don't we have generally lower classroom size than is
do.
required?
We do.
Yeah, so that would be another way to frame it, is
Okay.
we have 20 instead of 30 kids in a classroom, or whatever it is.
Right, which that creates the funding situation I just mentioned, where
Right.
we do have more teachers.
More
It's the
teachers.
class size that's driving that.
Yeah,
We have an allocation model we follow, and it's based on that lower class size.
great, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay. Does anyone have any other questions before I roll it back to Dr. Gant? Because I think you still had a few more other questions. Did anyone else want to? Okay, Dr. Gant, I'll go ahead and turn the mic back over to you.
Thank you. With the Learning Center, let me see if I can, yeah. With the Learning Center, can you remind me of how many students are there? I know we'll have 5 new teaching positions, and like we're staffing that center with custodial, but how many students are we in? Well, actually, I guess we would know by now. How many students are we starting off with at the Learning Center in the fall?
55? 35. We start
35?
out with
Okay,
35, yes.
okay.
Sorry. That's,
And then that's a combination, Dr. Hooker, of like middle and high school, right? Okay.
yes, that's correct.
Okay. And there are no, like these 5 new teacher positions, right now we don't have any allocated for the Learning Center because it's sort of, we're splitting it up. Or will there already?
No, the Learning Center,
Mhm.
those 5 additional positions,
Mhm.
remember, we are allocating for middle school, because in the past, all of those teachers taught both middle school and high school, and they didn't have class on Wednesday. Now, this will be a full-day program. You will have 4 additional teachers and a specials teacher, so that kids could, it will be like a traditional school, that they will be able to rotate to a connections class or an electives class.
Okay, and so the 4 additional teachers is in addition to how many teachers? How many teachers does the Learning Center have currently?
They currently, the Learning Center has 4 to 5 5. They have
Okay.
currently 5 teachers.
Okay.
So it'll be a total of 10 teachers that will be there, including 1 special person, specials, or we
Mhm.
call them connections.
Okay. Okay, so those 10 teachers will be for the 35 students that we'll add.
And you must understand, we may start out with 35. By Christmas, we may be up to 75.
Mm-hmm.
And it depends, because sometimes we get students who are coming from other districts who are assigned to an alternative school placement. We have to place there as well.
Okay. And then just my last, it's not a question, but more of a statement. I did want to revisit the idea of some support for increasing the amount for our classified staff and our stipends for teachers and our librarians. So I know the librarians are on certified. I meant like their actual operating budget within the, within the actual media center.
Oh, budgets that are, that they receive
Yes.
for purchasing books and all of that.
Yes,
That's based
yes.
upon the student FTE count, the student enrollment.
Okay. And so, yeah, I just wanted to reiterate my support and recommendation that we consider those with that .55 that's left. I do understand it's a delicate balance with how we maintain that, but I think with the stipends, it's a little bit more understandable that that may be it could be a one-time stipend. It's not that we're adding a position necessarily. And with the classified staff, it is a little bit different because that is, I mean, that's a part of their salary. But each time there's an increase for certified people, classified people are always on they're typically on the lower end of receiving that, and they have the worst retirement options. It's better than what we've had before, but it's still not comparable to TRS. And so I'm guessing that with some, intentionality going into this next year, if we have to cut back in other areas, even if that includes, work with the millage rate or work with where we are with what, with any caps, or just needing to cut back, I think there may be something, we can go into this year's maybe budget, because we'll still have to approve all of these different items if they're over a certain amount as they come before us. So I think we would be able to make it work if we had to make it work by cutting or looking at some other areas. But I really want to strongly reiterate that with that 0.55 that we have, figuring out how we can accommodate either those things and maybe any other ideas that board colleagues have. But I certainly understand the desire to be conservative, and I'm not countering that. I agree with that. I just think that we can be conservative, we can plan as we go throughout this year, but I sort of feel like our classified staff, they're sort of on the, the end of a lot of the increases that we receive. So,
Dr. Gann, excuse me, but what areas would you say we should consider cutting if we needed to? Or did I miss something?
you mean for this year?
Yes, in order to make that happen.
It's probably a longer conversation, but, I think it would involve looking at, one, what funds are actually used throughout the year. So for instance, in all areas, like when we look at mental health, for instance, some of the places we've contracted with, are we really using those sessions? Is there a way that we can streamline that work where it may cost more? That's just one area. With the curricula that we have, like across different subjects, like basically looking at any areas that we have excess, and starting there. I'll probably should stop there without having looked through. I mean, I've looked through the notebook, but I think there are probably areas that we can look at with a closer eye to say, are we using this particular position in the most efficient way, cost-efficient way? And so, I think there are areas, I don't want that to be a prerequisite for us being able to support our classified staff. We are adding a lot of new positions, and I think they're all important positions. But at this current time, these areas, these places are operating without these positions. And so we obviously need a health liaison, and we obviously need these other areas. And yes, we need 5 security people at Clark Middle, but I think there may be some ways that if we had to, no one wants to, but certainly if we absolutely had to, there may be areas where we can look at excess and look at if we are effectively using these particular positions in the most, financially efficient way. So that's my thoughts.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Dr. Gann.
Okay, Mr. Denson?
Thank you, and I think just building on Dr. Gant's comments, I guess I wonder if we could just get an estimate of what the increased cost would be if we went from 1750 to 2250, right? Yeah. Yeah, if we just get an estimate of how much that cost would be. And then also if I could get the numbers of how much higher our actual revenues were over our projected revenues for last year's budget.
Okay.
Because I know that we usually come in a bit higher than usual because of some conservative estimates. So yeah, and maybe if we had those numbers in front of us, we could, I'll make kind of a calculated and informed decision if we can eat that additional cost.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
I'll be glad to provide. Yeah, and you are correct. Typically, I will say we've adjusted revenues throughout the year. I think there were a couple items that weren't budgeted last year, one being Rutland, which we were going to use fund balance for. Fortunately, with the interest rate environment the way it is, we've been able to cover most of that with our interest income. So I think that's a huge, but it's something I've already started looking at as we get, normally I wait till about the middle of May to start kind of looking at June, because then we have pretty good numbers, because school's out now, so our operating expenditures are kind of, falling in line. We know how many payrolls, of course, we have left. So yeah, I can definitely do that. Not a problem at all.
Okay, thank you. Are there others? Yes, Ms. Davis?
I think okay, I'm going to wait and I'll have this conversation. I want to better understand the whole, and I don't think it's your job to do that, but I want to understand the cost of the Learning Center and how is that distributed. I don't know who can tell us that or tell me that. I'm interested. I don't know if anybody else is.
Can you tell me what details would you want?
So we have like the Career Academy, and the Career Academy is a program, right? And
Correct.
so now it sounds like to me that Classic City, we've had the discussion, is it a program, is it a school? It is a school. So the Learning Center, is it a program, is it a school? I want to better understand what that is and how we came to that and what we expect to gain from that whole experience.
The Learning Center is a program. It has always been a program, not a school. And that ends, back in 2000, I believe, it was with Ombudsman. It was taken away from the school system and contracted out. And I believe in 2018, you guys remind me, 18 or 19, it was brought back as a Learning Center, as a program. Am I right in saying that? Okay, maybe 217, and that's used for your alternative school program. And I believe, I know by offering more social workers, having more counselors there to work with the students, it would be beneficial. But it is a program, not a school.
Does anyone else have any questions, thoughts, comments? Okay. I would like to say that I do hear Dr. Gantt's request, and I too, as a board member, support an exploration of what it would take to maybe use that .45 that's sitting over there. That'll keep us at 20 mils, so you would be happy as a CFO, but would potentially mean a great deal to our classified employees if they could get a little bit more in their monthly or bi-monthly COFRs. So I do support Dr. Gantt's recommendation to explore that further. And I had a quick question, if everyone else was in a good space to, okay. I did get a few emails from parents about ASP, and so I wanted to throw it out there that there's some grumblings in the community that there's inequality across our ASP programs from school to school, but there's also now more money that's coming from parent pockets to pay for ASP. And with inflation and just the increase of living expenses currently, you could imagine that it's very troubling for parents to receive an email that ASP costs are going to go up in 24, 25, and this is even before we have passed a budget. So I wanted to kind of throw that out there, that perhaps among the 4.5, some exploration could be on how we stop operating at a deficit with ASP and perhaps support those programs within the schools better, and then not pass the expense on to parents, but rather absorb it within the district. So that was my sort of, and this came very last minute. I opened my inbox this morning and saw some things. So I just wanted to throw that out there as well. But I think that those, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mr. Greiner.
No, I'm sorry. I was getting, because I think I brought this, Dr. Elder, who's our Executive Director of Federal Programs, I brought this to Dr. Hooker, I guess, several months ago, because we were looking at surrounding districts, and we haven't raised that cost in several years. I think what we, as you know from the audit finding, we were trying to take some of the salaries from ASP and move them over to our ARPA funding, which we did one year. Really, looking back on it, we probably should have left them over there. I think the intent behind that increase was just to kind of sustain the program a little bit, because it does typically, it's not part of the general fund budget, it's a separate fund all of itself, a special revenue fund. It has typically lost money each year, but what we saw with ARPA funding is it was losing. At some point, I don't think there was a lot of salary control with our ASP program. Again, getting back to your point, each school was kind of doing it different. We're trying to get everybody on the same page. We can definitely explore that a little bit more. We were trying to get it where it at least breaks even as a school district. It's done much better this year. I will give our schools credit. We met in our district leadership meetings that we have with our principals monthly at the beginning of the school year and said, ESSER won't be, or ARPA won't be covering salaries anymore, so there needs to be some more control over that. I think we've tried to do better training with our coordinators as well, just trying to manage that program a little bit better. Again, it's not, in years past when I was here, it typically broke even. When I was here in 20, it broke even or made a little bit of a profit. There is some fund balance, roughly around $700,000, I believe, in the after-school program right now. I think our concern was if we keep going forward, eventually there's not going to be any fund balance in that after-school program in several years. And then we would have to look at how are we going to sustain that going forward. We do run that at all 14 elementary schools. I think in the past, I don't believe the district did that. I believe previous superintendents, the decision was made to, and previous boards was made to change that to where every elementary school, which I totally agree if you're going to, I think for equity purposes, but I think that is something we need to look into, and we can definitely address that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So I think that oh, yes, Ms. Hull.
Just to echo that, I know at one point there was funding from the Department of Family and Children Services that they would kind of subsidize some of the after-school fees for families. Do we know if that's still an option, or if that information and how to apply is readily out there?
I will definitely have to look into that one, but I'll be glad to.
Thank you.
And I think Dr. Elder would probably know that answer, but I'll definitely check with her.
Thank you.
All right. I think that wraps it up with our board questions, comments. So we're good? Awesome. Okay, so just to wrap up before we move to item 6, a reminder to the public, we do have 2 additional hearings on the 4th tomorrow and the 12th next Wednesday at 6 p.m. with an opportunity for public comment. You can sign up in advance by email or sign up upon arrival prior to our start time of 6 p.m. And then the final vote for the budget will take place Thursday, June 14th, after the budget, during our regular business meeting. And now we will move over to item 6. Would someone like to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
And I second, but did you say June 13th or June 14th?
The June 12th is our last hearing, and then June 13th, I might have said 14th, sorry. June 13th is our regular meeting where we will vote for the budget. Did I say 14th? Okay, my apologies, it was 13th, my apologies. It's been a long day with children. Okay, wonderful. We have a motion on the floor by Mr. Denson.
Second.
Oh my gosh, I skipped number 5 altogether. I am so sorry. Okay, so we are not going to adjourn. We are actually moving to item number 5 for the millage rate hearing. Mr. Greiner?
It's kind of the same conversation. I did put, let's see, and get Lisa or Ms. Palmer to pull up. Can you pull up the attachments for the millage rate piece? I'm sorry. I do have the rollback calculation in there in our 5-year history. Honestly, as part of the budget discussion, I think the conversation is, at the May 9th meeting, it was decided to leave the millage rate at 18.8 mils. We've advertised that we're going to leave it at 18.8 mils. Any changes to that would require re-advertising. So this just starts essentially the clock starts now that we can't formally approve it till June 13th. We've ran all the ads in compliance, as I mentioned, with the tax commissioner, which the ad requirements are set by the Georgia Department of Revenue. So this is the actual rollback sheet that is calculated by the tax assessor and the tax commissioner, and then I've verified as well. You can see the proposed millage rate, 18.8. If you scroll down a little bit, Lisa, there you go. The rollback millage rate, as I mentioned, is 17.511. That's the reassessment value increase of 7.36. So then the question becomes, well, how did our digest increase 9.63%? The other 2.37, that's what I get for doing it in my head. The other 2.27 is just new construction growth. Parcels that were not on the digest in 23 that will be added in 24. So that's any new construction, any new pieces of property that were not in existence in 2023's tax digest. So, the 5-year history, we're also required, we did advertise it. It basically shows the proposed 24 digest and then the previous 5 years. There's a separate attachment for that, Lisa. Yep, there you go. So this again shows, keeping in mind that when it says 2019, those are tax digest years. So 2019 is actually FY20 for us. This is where it always gets fun. So 24's digest will be for our FY25 year. So the numbers at the top are tax digest years, and then you just add one for the physical year on those. So again, if you go to the column for 2024, you'll see somebody ask you, what does 1 mil bring in for Clark County School District? It's that $7,391,056. So 7.4. So one mil is worth 7.4. So if you do, Dr. Yates asked that question earlier. So if you do the 17.511, it's about a 1.299. So that's where the 9 million comes from. So 1 mil is about 7.3, and then you add roughly 30% of that. So that's where the 9 million came from. So. And that's, again, all we're, for the millage rate, we present it, proposed at 18.8, and of course, if you had public comment, we would have that at this time on the millage rate.
Thank you, Mr. Greiner. Are there any questions? Okay. And I do not believe that we received any sign-ups for public comment. All right, so we will move on to item number 6, adjournment. I believe we had a motion on the floor, but we weren't at that item, so does Mr. Denson need to remake?
I place my motion back on the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Denson.
And I second it again.
Thank you. Motion made by Mr. Denson and seconded by Ms. Davis. We will see you all tomorrow, same time, same place. Thank you.